now move on to member question time. First question is Lindsay Ferris. Lindsay, please.
Thank you. Good evening. How will you stop the costs and risks of the town centre, in plural, regeneration project continuing to rise?
Thank you for your question, Lindsay. The costs of the town centre regeneration project remain in line with those budgeted for and identified within the project appraisals. As the scheme design evolves, the cost of building it will change and costs and values will be amended in the appraisals to reflect this. However, these will remain in line with the Council's principle that the regeneration project must be financially viable and not rely upon the taxpayer subsidy to deliver it. Risk factors relating to the town centre regeneration project have also not risen, and it could be argued that with the ever-improving national and regional economy have actually decreased since the project started. As the developer and the investor in the scheme, the Council continues to apply rigorous conditions upon themselves and the project to ensure that the costs are managed and any risks are minimised in regards to the regeneration. These include pre-let condition. Commercial development will only occur when the Council is confident that the legally signed up income from the developed units will be sufficient to cover the costs of developing those said units. Viability condition. The project must be financially viable and create an asset with an investment value that exceeds the costs of developing it. This is continually appraised through detailed and ongoing assessments of viability appraisals. Market testing and assessment. Appointment of professional consultancy to advise on letting strategy and carry out continued market testing to ensure the right mix of retail and leisure providers are signed up to achieve regeneration objectives and ensure success. And lastly, value for money and competitive procurement. As a project, this is managed in line with Part 12 of the Council's Constitution, which clearly sets out ways in which projects are managed and procured to gain best value for the Council and the ratepayer. Thank you.
Councillor Ferris, do you have a supplementary?
No.
Thank you. Councillor D. Tomlin. Your next, please. Thank you.
Thank you. What have you done between last summer and this summer to resolve problems with grass cutting, as these issues were raised over a year ago, but the situation since then has got worse?
Thank you for your question there, Dean. The grass cutting service provided for the Council by Quadrum has remained unchanged since 2009. Last year, for the first time, it came under some strain as a result of particularly warm and wet weather. And at that time, additional one-off funding was put into the service to cope with what was hoped to be a one-off situation. Unfortunately, this spring and summer has also been extremely warm and wet, and so grass and other vegetation has again grown exceptionally quickly. Many other councils across the country are experiencing similar challenges. In the light of this, we've initiated a review into the service to seek long-term solutions which will offer value for money alongside excellent customer service. We're working with Quadrum to identify realistic, achievable options, and we'll be talking to members, town and parish councils, residents, and other interested parties about these options later in the year. In addition, we're working to see how customer inquiries can be dealt with efficiently and effectively, and further information has already been put on the website, including the schedule of cuts, which enables our residents to understand when their next cut is programmed. Although at the beginning of the season there have been bigger gaps between cuts than the usual 5 weeks, the programme is now catching up, and the gaps between cuts will reduce, and this will become visible in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Tom, do you have a supplementary?
I'm glad to hear it's not being all kicked into the long grass, as it were. Would you agree with me that when the grass is actually cut, if the job isn't actually done very well in the first place, which in some instances has happened, then that will not help the situation? There have been some instances that I have seen where the grass has just been cut and it's actually quite a poor job. It looked to me as if it had been done with quite blunt instruments.
I think I've made 2 very quick points to that. The first is we rely on residents and councillors to report where they see poor performance. Otherwise, we won't be able to keep the contractor at bay. The second is, with the extreme growth, definitely any machinery has had difficulty in cutting through the grass at this time. That's not an excuse, but I think it's something that does happen. In response to your opening one, we won't make hay when the sun shines.
Thank you. We now move on to ward matters. Can I allow members to put forward their questions? Please keep your hands up whilst we take your names. Can we start with David Lee, please? Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I would just follow what Angus was saying. I'm pleased to see that he's led on the sound of the Carnival of Straw anyway, which I think is helping greatly. Could I ask, please, especially bearing in mind we have a question or a motion coming up, could I ask the position on Eustace Crescent, or as it will now be known, Phoenix Crescent, and how we're getting on with the affordable housing, which is much needed in this area? I think that would maybe be answered by the chairman of our House of Champions.
Thank you, David, for the question. I would have been able to fill you in with everything, with what it was I hadn't heard to say, but Eustace Crescent, or should I now call it Phoenix Avenue? Sorry. Yes. Is in for planning. There have been one or two minor amendments required during the planning process, all of which have been complied with. Demolition work is now in hand. Just to also let you know that our third scheme at the former Foster's site in Woodley is now fully in the public domain and was very well received by residents at the public consultation in Woodley a few weeks ago, and I understand also by Woodley Town Council earlier in the week. Demolition has been arranged for this site in conjunction with Phoenix Avenue, and both this scheme will run about 1 month behind Phoenix, if all goes well. Members will be aware that the progress of these two schemes have been a cooperation between officers as they relinquish responsibility and WHL as the Council's preferred development partner. It's been a pleasure to guide them through the process, as this type of work is outside most people's experience. That, I think, really is all I can add at the moment, except that, David, we have 18 smaller schemes in the pipeline which we'll bring forward in the same way.
Thank you. Councillor Prue-Gray, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I was expecting to come and ask a question about the park and ride and why it's been delayed in my ward, but in fact I've got a different question about the park and ride. With somewhat to my amazement, things have happened during the course of this meeting. I've received a number of texts to inform us that there are 19 traveller caravans in the car park at Winnersh, at Showcase Cinema and in the park and ride car park, that the police have been on site and have removed 6 of them. I don't know what's going to happen to the rest, but I would like to ask, why can't we protect our park and ride car park from travellers?
It's constantly a problem, and I think some of you with memory will remember that we actually had people in the car park of the council, travellers. I mean, we do what we can. I mean, we put in all sorts of measures, but I think we're even fine with farmers. They seem to turn up with diggers and they move blocks of concrete, but it is something that we're very, very keen to make sure that all our sites that we have are as secured as well as we can. But if they can get in the council car park, I really can't say much more than that.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul-Lawrence.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This question is to Executive Member for Health and Wellbeing. As you may already know, many people in Woodley and surrounding areas, together with our MP Rob Wilson, concerned about access to GP. Can the executive member tell me what is being done to establish where new GPs will be deployed? Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul, for your question. As you rightly point out, many people have raised this concern, and I'm pleased to advise that Andrew Grimes, an expert in this area, has been commissioned to review the number of GPs required in certain growth areas, including Woodley, to establish how many GPs will be required until 2026. Work is progressing with a number of GP surgeries where there is an appetite for expansion. Where this is not possible, but where there is still a need for more GPs, then this will be factored into the future funding for new surgeries. The borough's population is predicted to rise by 20% over the next 10 years, so this work will help map out what is required in the short and the longer terms. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Shushack.
Following the work you started in October on traffic lights at Winnish Crossroads, they've only started working this week. What will you be doing to make sure that the upgrades at the Showcase Cinema roundabout will actually work this time if you're using the same supplier who couldn't get the lights to work at all?
Again, I mean, sorry. Right. Again, I mean, we use the contractors we use, and we've used at Winnish. They've put the new systems in the lights, but they tell us it takes time for them to settle down. They've been working on it for some time. I do agree with you, and it's something that we've been monitoring with them. I think with regards to Winnish and the Showcase Cinema, I think it's difficult for me to give any commitment that we will definitely do our best. But again, I mean, it's all about when they're installing new systems, they do take time to settle down, and that's all I can say on the matter.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Holton.
Thank you. Mine's a board question, and it's for the Executive Member for Education. Please can you confirm that the Halton School buildings have effectively been completed? And I'd also appreciate if you could just clarify a recent breach of provisionary working hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holton. The practical completion of the works was successfully done on at the end of June of 2014. An unplanned event did occur at the end of June whilst the contractor was clearing his compound. An unauthorised vehicle entered the contractor's compound on a Sunday to clear some waste material, and this incident was reported to the LPA enforcement officer. The Property Services project manager was contacted immediately, and the contractor was reminded of the planning conditions and was instructed not to repeat such actions. No further complaints have been received since this date. This demonstrates very clearly that this council is robust and timely in enforcing all planning conditions, no matter what the circumstance.
Thank you. Councillor Tom McCann.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Angus. I did tell him I was going to raise it. Just for members to be aware, last September, October, over 1 million gallons of raw sewage poured into a lake in my constituency, Moors Lake. And since then, I've been badgering the council about insisting that Thames Water restock this lake. As up to the date of Friday of last week, can Angus explain to the council why this council has failed to serve my community and insist that the people who damaged this lake restock it properly? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your timely warning, so I could get the latest, because things have been happening over the last few days on this. I recognise it's a long time since last October. Both the Environment Agency and Thames Water are claiming no evidence of lots of fish being lost. This Borough Council still awaits and is chasing confirmation from Thames Water that their system is now fully operational and okay. The Environment Agency did take Thames Water to task, and a warning was issued to Thames Water. Unfortunately, we still await a copy to see exactly on what grounds that warning was presented. The Countryside Service have noted excessive invasive plants, and these will be sprayed. It's a side thing, just so you know. By the way, the spraying will not affect any fish that are remaining there, which I believe there are some, because otherwise the herons wouldn't be sitting there. But it is something we're still on. It is something we're still on in the case of. The lake is very shallow, and if this weather continues, I could even imagine it drying up, and the fish will definitely not survive. But we will keep you updated.
Councillor Shahid Yunis, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Mayor. My question is for our Executive Member for Highways. Maintenance work on A329 Dodder Viaduct started late last night. As a result, the southern carriageway road slip will be closed at Winnish Triangle, with traffic diverted by Church Road, Hicks Lane and A4. And these routes directly go through Bulbush and Whitegate. What measures have been put in place to mitigate the increased traffic impact on these areas?
Thank you, Shahid. The major work on the A329N actually commenced last night, and as reported by our spy in the sky, I'm happy to report that there were no significant traffic issues this morning on the network in the vicinity of the work. This will of course continue to be monitored over the coming days and for the duration of the project. The A329M is one of the busiest roads in the borough and carries more than 60,000 vehicles on a typical weekday. Any work that restricts the amount of traffic on the road will inevitably have an impact on the rest of the road network. We have designed detailed traffic management plans to minimise traffic disruption as much as possible, and you can see them on the main WBC website. The major project is very complex and necessary. It will replace the bridge's noisy joints, install new permanent concrete safety barriers, improve drainage and signs, and will give the dual carriageway a low noise road surface. While there will be some pain while the work is undertaken, this significant investment on the motorway should mean we do not need to carry out any major work on this section of the road for several years to come, therefore reducing long-term disruption to road users. There will be a regular traffic update in the local media and radio, such as Jack FM, and on our Facebook and Twitter platforms. The following problems faced by motorists and the impact on the surrounding roads during the preparatory work last October, we thought the original January 2014 schedule for the major project, opting for the summer schools holiday because the roads are a lot quieter. The Loddon Bridge Park and Ride will remain open throughout, and onward bus journeys won't be affected, but return trips will take a little longer than normal because of the traffic management in place. And also there will be a 24-hour breakdown service which will also be available on the road.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis Harris, please.
Thank you. I did give advance warning of this question. For the second time in 2 years, businesses in the centre of Twyford will experience severe disruption due to essential works. In 2012, the bridge between Twyford and Charvel was closed for many months. Now SSE are to start urgent electric cable work along Wargrave and Waltham Road on 28th of July for up to 3 months. What assistance can Woking Borough Council give to help with alleviating this problem, in particular with business rates under the Valuation Office Agency Material Change of Circumstances in brackets MCC process, plus any other arrangements that may be open to Woking Borough Council or the businesses concerned? Thank you.
I'm going to answer this one. Right. The businesses affected can make an application to the Valuation Office for a temporary reduction. Such a reduction was recently granted to businesses working in town centre as a result of the impact of waterworks. Also, they could make an application to the council under its business rate hardship relief fund, whereby a drop in trade income would need to be relevant. So those, I think, are 2 options for your traders. Thank you.
Mike Haynes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question's a war question from Sonny. Concerns the Third Thames Bridge. Following the vote that this council took in March, I was wondering if the relevant exec member could just update us where we are in the project. Thank you.
Thank you. we are moving forward with this, and you will be happy that, to hear that we had a meeting just over a week ago, which included the 3 MPs that are involved, and also the councils and Bracknell. And there's been another, it was agreed at that meeting that there would be a further study, and the funds will be available for it.
Thank you. That concludes the ward matter questions. Thank you for all those questions and answers. We now move on to motions. And the first motion is from Lindsay Ferris.
Thank you. Many, if not all of us in this chamber, have over the years received complaints or concerns from residents about antisocial parking in their area. Some of this can be long-term parking, for example where commuters park all day, or short-term, for example where outside of schools in the morning and evening rush hours. This activity can be very upsetting for our local residents. We at Woking Borough Council, one of only 4 or 5 such authorities in the country, are dependent upon the police to manage this issue for us. It is clear that parking enforcement is a low priority for them, made all the more difficult by recent budget cuts in their area. Over recent years, there have been a significant number of resident petitions on this topic. The current position where any proposed change or action on parking enforcement is dependent upon Thames Valley Police support is no longer sustainable. This is particularly difficult when police support parking arrangements in one road, whilst at the same time not in another, despite similar problems occurring as we've had recently in Twyford. We believe now is the time to review this relationship and decriminalise parking in this area as soon as practically possible. It is recognised that there will be costs involved and that it will take some time to organise, but we believe our long-suffering residents deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
Yes.
Would you wish to speak now?
I do, please. Thank you. There are many areas in the Woking Borough, as Lindsay has said, who live with inconsiderate parking, commute park on a daily basis. Also around schools, there are lots of problems around schools. We used to have traffic wardens, certainly in Twyford. I remember she was very diligent and got on very well with local people. But now these issues are actually left to the police. And at present, Thames Valley Policing Area, there are only a handful of councils. We believe there are 4 who do not have decriminalised parking enforcement. This is all very well, but anyone who contacts the 101 number about parking issues, quite often now, and it's happened to me as well, are told that it's nothing to do with the police. They are then told to contact Woking Borough Council, who then advise callers to contact the police. This is clearly not helping our residents and is not acceptable. There's clearly something needs to be done about this. We've all heard about Crossrail and the services it will bring to this area, and hopefully this will benefit residents working in London and travelling in on a daily basis. But before this happens, we do need to think really carefully about the impact that this will have on residents living nearby and near to railway stations. We are urging the council to act now. I cannot actually understand why we're in this situation. We've allowed this to happen. What is holding us back? Please support this motion, as failure to do so will send a very negative message to our residents. What happens is when they ring the 101 number, because it's for the whole of the Thames Valley, somebody answering the phone there does not understand that Woking do not have deregulated parking at the moment, decriminalised parking, and they believe that the council actually employ traffic wardens. They don't understand we don't. And even when you tell them we don't, they still say, no, it's up to the council, you've got to ring the council. And I've been in that situation with a car parked very dangerously. I rang and I was sent to ring the council, and I knew, of course, that wasn't the case. When I tried to say that was not the case, the person concerned absolutely swore blind that it was definitely the council who was responsible. Now, this is happening, I've had phone calls from residents as well, this is happening on a regular basis, and I don't really think it's fair on our residents. There have been some work trying to educate the people answering the phones for 101, if somebody rings from Wokingham, what the situation is, but it's a very, very long way round. We should never ever, I don't think, have left it to get so bad. It is a situation now where people are parking on yellow lines on a regular basis and nothing's been done about it. And you know what it's like, somebody sees somebody park there and think, oh, that's a good idea, I'll park there as well. And in some cases, actually, it has been really dangerous. So I'm just urging you not to hold back and to do something, because failure to do that will lose support from our residents in Wokingham. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if any other members wish to speak? Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Lindsay, for proposing this motion, and also for your comments. I think we certainly recognise the situation and have every sympathy with residents in this situation. The Council committed to investigate civil parking enforcement or decriminalisation, and a cross-party working group, the Congestion Alleviation Team, took this on. In an unprecedented move, I propose that one of your members, Rachel Shepherd-Dubé, should chair a subgroup focusing on CPE, but this was later rejected by your leader. However, on 5th of November 2013, before this subgroup ceased to meet, it discussed the CPE remit and a key factor emerged. The Secretary of State would not allow us to implement CPE by zones. Although CPE will provide a means of controlling inconsiderate parking and parking abuse, there are still some parts of the borough and some councillors who remain to be convinced about its effectiveness. If and when implemented, it will need to be on a borough-wide basis, and it is vital that we consult across the borough to ensure the implications of doing or not doing it are fully understood. We can then discuss implementation, taking people with us. I therefore propose an amended motion. Due to the lack of resources of the Thames Valley Police in enforcing parking restrictions and tackling inconsiderate parking in the borough, particularly around train stations and schools, this council commits to consulting residents borough-wide on the policy of civil parking enforcement and, subject to the majority of residents supporting the policy, decriminalising parking as soon as possible. Now that's the motion, but I would just add a comment at the end here that all members should be aware that following acceptance by residents, it will still take approximately 2 years to introduce CPE. In the meantime, we will need to work closely with the police to ensure they provide as much support as possible within the constraints of their other priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a second for this amendment? The process is that I've asked for a second, so I'll come back.
Yes. I understand.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Those of you in the chamber know I've been a long-standing proponent of decriminalisation, so I will be supporting the amended motion. Just a couple of points I'd like to make, just for clarification. Dee, you mentioned the traffic wardens, they were police traffic wardens. The council has never... Okay, yes, but they were police, and the same issue of resources. Secondly, any police issues, if you'd let me continue, please.
Point of personal explanation. Traffic wardens were understood to have been from the police. Everybody knows they were from the police, Keith. Okay, thank you.
Please continue. Thank you.
In terms of any issues with the police, you really should escalate them up to the Chief Constable. We as a council can't address their issues. You're absolutely right. Some of the people on the end of a call centre are frankly diabolical, but we need to get people to escalate it to the police, to the Commissioner. Now, you have one of the issues around this is that it will cost money. You do not make money out of this service. Now, I still support it, even on the back of that. But we actually also have to be very innovative on how we can offset that cost. So, for instance, we could easily ask, say, Wokingham Town Council, if they were willing to contribute and they could have, say, one of these wardens 2 days a week, or how much they pay, and they can tell us where they want them. We have council employees who do actually go out to roads all the time, like our highways inspectors. If they were trained to do the decriminalisation, they could actually pick up, spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever when they're going out to a road. All these things will contribute to keeping the cost down, but it will still cost. But as I said, I certainly do support this motion. Thank you.
So I think we want to mention something about the member.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I must apologise that there is actually an error I see in the proposed amended wording. One too many restrictions. If we look at the second line, it should read tackling inconsiderate parking in the borough. My apologies to all members for that.
Is someone on? Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you, Keith, for advance warning with too many restrictions of the amendment. We've spoken in here within the group, and we can accept the amendment. We think that it gives the right sort of message. We take note, and if you remember in my comments just now, I said that it is recognised that there will be costs involved and that they will take time to organise when I spoke. And thank you for indicating that it could take up to 2 years. But the one concern I had is that this was get sort of kicked in the long grass, but I don't think that's the case. I think we've got some momentum here, although not everyone is in agreement. But this is an issue that can only get worse with increased number of houses being built in our area and increased rail traffic, particularly where we live in Twyford with the Crossrail coming, and it also affects Wokingham and early stations because there's increased Anguinish as well. So I think that we have got an agreement here that we would accept the amendment as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett.
Thank you. I wasn't actually intending to speak, but I am now. First of all, I'd like to say that I think we should be able to reassure people who are not sure whether they want this decriminalised parking, because although you do have to introduce it on a borough-wide basis, what you do in each area can vary according to what the area is. And therefore, if you don't want huge numbers of parking restrictions in your area, we should be able to arrange that, and it will be under our control. So I think there's less to worry about than you think. On the subject of traffic wardens, we used to have 4 traffic wardens, and 2 were paid for by the police, and although they were employed by the police, 2 were funded by the council. And we weren't actually getting value for money, and in the end we weren't getting any traffic wardens either, despite still contributing the funding. So that was not a satisfactory state of affairs. And the final thing I wanted to say was this question of Rochelle and chairing the working group. Okay, the working group in question consisted of a number of Conservatives and 1 Lib Dem, who was not only outnumbered, but has less access than the Conservatives to what's going on and can be outvoted at any point. So it's a bit ridiculous to expect someone to chair a group under those circumstances. Participate, yes, and we're very happy to participate in it, but chair it, no. And there is another reason as well, and that is to do with process. The working groups are actually still outside the council constitution, and at the time this one was established, some were operating without proper agendas, minutes or support. There was no formal request for a Lib Dem to chair the group, nor any discussion of the group's terms of reference before that, nor any agreement on what the role would involve or what officer support would be available. And that isn't very satisfactory, and the group has now taken a decision that we will not take on any future similar roles unless they are properly defined. And that's why we did not wish Rochelle to chair the working group on decriminalised parking. It has nothing to do with our views on decriminalised parking itself. which we have supported for more than 10 years, and I'm very happy to hear tonight that we may get some progress, although I'm slightly dubious about how you're going to assess whether the majority of the residents actually support it, because that sounds like an awful lot of consultation which this council possibly has not done in the past. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately for me, peace has not broken out in our time here this evening, so I'm going to start by chucking a couple of buns around. It is this council's duty to provide proper parking within its communities. This council has failed for decades to provide proper parking when people have been putting in planning applications. They have always gone to the bare minimum. They have very rarely, in fact I can hardly think of any, that actually provide any community parking so that when people have visitors, that they have somewhere to park without causing obstructions and nuisances to local residents. Now, we can address the issue by decriminalising and about time too. That's good. Asking the public, that's good. Whether or not you listen to the public, we'll yet to see. But unless you address the fundamental point of giving people enough places to put their cars when they're at home, you will inevitably cause an overflow, which will inevitably cause irritation. In your last planning document, you failed there to set the scene for the next 10 to 15 years. So merely decriminalising will not address the issue. Merely decriminalising will not stop the complaints. Merely decriminalising will at least be a step forward, which is a remarkable small step considering we've been arguing for 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris. Councillor Weeks, apologies.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to correct something Tom's just said. You referred to this issue on parking having existed for decades, I think your words, Tom. As you may recall, the esteemed John Prescott actually inflicted on all local authorities restrictions on parking, to the extent that we were obliged as a planning authority when I first joined this council 10 years ago to actually refuse planning applications sometimes on the basis that they provide too much parking. Now that's a historic thing that we cannot correct in history, but as you know, for the last few years, this council has had much higher parking standards that reflect two things: the lack of public transport because of the nature of the borough we live in, and also the fact that there's a very high proportion of car ownership, a much higher level of car ownership in Wokingham, due to partly to its affluence and partly through the lack of public transport. But for instance, last night at Planning Committee, we approved a new housing development where there were almost 3 parking spaces per dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris, thank you for the motion. Councillor Singleton, thank you for the amendment. And Councillor Ferris, thank you for accepting the amendment. And I think we are now in a position to take a vote. So, on the motion as amended. All in favour? Oh. Okay. Okay, we move on to the second motion of the evening. That's Councillor Bryn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the most intractable problems we face as a country is how to provide everyone with a decent roof over their head. And this motion is an attempt to look at one corner of that housing problem, which is to say, whilst recognising the financial constraints the council operates under, to look at what it could do to help people on low incomes who are renting in the private sector. Now, why bring this motion now? Because the council is about to start formulating its housing strategy. In the last year, work was done on the affordable housing strategy. It did well on information gathering, but then it started to flounder and it stalled. There's been some progress on smaller strategy documents dealing with older people, which Bob has put in a lot of work on, and younger people's housing, very much focused on affordable housing. Now we're going to have an overall housing strategy. We have an opportunity to look at the issue in the round. The private rented sector is an area that gets less attention, and yet it affects so many people that it deserves a closer look. There is nothing wrong with privately rented housing in itself. I'm not having a go at private landlords as a whole, but rogue landlords do exist. And at the bottom of the market, where there's less profit and the prospective tenants are the most likely to have financial worries, that is where problems are likely to occur. And there are things the council can do to help without spending a lot of money. For example, like 110 of 194 councils that responded to a recent government consultation on the private rented sector, the council could offer a landlord accreditation scheme, which will provide some assurance for tenants that landlords in the scheme are committed to providing good quality accommodation that's properly managed. Indeed, the council advertised such a scheme on the council website as recently as the 10th of July. But when I asked officers about it, it turned out the scheme had not been operational for 3 years. I was very disappointed, not just because there's no scheme, but because a non-existent scheme had been allowed to remain on the council website for 3 years. The page has now been removed, although ghost references to it remain. I have a screenshot of it, and what it offered seems to me to be something sensible, and it should be revived. Then there's the pot of money for discretionary housing payments, which Anthony referred to earlier on. This is government money, which, as the name suggests, can be used at the council's discretion to help people who have financial problems related to housing. After the bedroom tax was introduced, the discretionary housing payments money was increased. The council set up some criteria for evaluating requests for money, as it did with the very similar local welfare provision which came in at the same time. And it did some things right. For example, interviewing applicants to try to get to the bottom of why they were struggling, rather than simply giving a short-term handout which wouldn't solve a longer-term problem. But unfortunately, the council set the threshold criteria so high that in March, more than half the money, £65,595 to be exact, had to be returned to the government. What a waste of a resource we could have used to help people locally. The policy for making payments needs reviewing. I think I heard Anthony say that it was being. We need to have that money to use it to help local people. I do hope that Anthony will get on with that promise review and it will appear quickly. There isn't time for me in a 5-minute speech to go into all the other things the council could do, and I'm sure other people have ideas. The main point is that as a council, if we can do it cost effectively, we should act to help our residents when they're struggling. We have an opportunity to get some ideas into the council's forthcoming housing strategy. I hope all members support the principles behind this motion and that everyone will therefore support the motion itself.
Councillor Murray, thank you. Do you have a second? Please, thank you. Wish to speak there?
If bread had risen in price by the same proportion as the housing cost since 1980, then a loaf of bread would now cost you £8.50. The average deposit for the first-time buyer in the 80s was about 12% of their annual income. The average deposit for the first-time buyer today is about 83% of their annual income. Getting on for 3 million adults under 35 now live with their parents. That actually caused more problems with parking in the local vicinities. And that will rise by a quarter by the end of this decade. In Woking, we are very fortunate that most people are in employment, and the average income is about £750 a week, which is very good. So we have high home ownership, it's easy for me to say right now, of 83%. We also have social housing, including about 2,700 of our own council houses. We have housing association properties as well. But we don't have enough of these lower price rental properties for all those who need them. As the motion says, the council is taking steps to build more affordable homes, but it will take time. Because the shortage of these houses is great, there will be a huge unsatisfied demand for many years to come. If people can't afford to buy, there isn't enough council or housing association property. That means people will end up in the private rented section. There is nothing wrong with that in itself. In other parts of Europe, like Germany, it is more common for people to rent than to buy houses. The problem is that the overall shortage of housing leads to high rents, which people cannot afford. Looking through the adverts recently, renting a 3-bedroom home in this area costs an absolute minimum of £1,000 a month, with an average more like about $1,300. People struggle to find properties to rent that they can afford. I actually had one of my local residents talk to me because they couldn't find one and they had no idea where they were going to go. They finally wound up going to Bracknell because it's cheaper than living here. Some landlords won't take people on housing benefits, which in some cases only covers about the cheapest 30% of the properties available. Sometimes tenants in private rented sector get into problems with their rent, with the state of the property, or suddenly finding their tenancy has ended when the house is sold. There is some limited advice available from the council, but more could be done. The council could use its influence and powers to improve such things as more proactive inspection of poor quality accommodation, or getting housing benefits paid directly to landlords more often, rather than paying to the individuals who seem to get into housing benefit problems then. These are the kind of things that we want the council to consider. We hope you will support us.
Thank you. Is there any other member wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Chairman. I'd like to make an amendment to this, very small amendment, and I would like to, just to say, the amendment I would like to make would be for the council to continue to investigate the cost rather than will investigate the cost, because we are actually doing it at the moment. And I just go forward on that. Currently, there are ways that we try to help with ensuring that residents get to stay in the borough, although we do find that there are still times when residents do end up moving to cheaper, more affordable accommodation outside Woking, which in some cases we have to accept for some is a better long-term solution. What we do and what we can do to help is we basically, we can offer discretionary housing payment, which has been mentioned tonight. If someone has a shortfall in rent, we can offer them short-term financial support. However, this type of payment can only be made if a resident is already in receipt of housing benefit. In 2013, additional funds were made available to address many of the restrictions being imposed by the government's welfare reform. The other thing we can offer is local welfare, which replaces the DWP social fund with effect from the 1st of April 2013. This allows the most vulnerable residents to ask for help with basic needs such as food, utility costs, travel and other such necessary items to protect health and well-being. There is also another side of the scheme which allows us to assist in keeping vulnerable people in the borough, such as care leavers or people fleeing violence. In cases like that, we are able to help with the cost of furniture, deposits and rent in advance payments. But let me make it clear, what I've outlined above will only deal with the issue in the short term. The long-term solution is to build more affordable housing in the borough. Our core strategy and other policies of the council are contributing to a predicted increase in the number of social houses by 2,200, shared ownership by 1,150 and affordable rent by 400 by 2026. In addition, the strategic development locations will deliver substantial commuted sums, with an average of 35% affordable housing, both on and off-site, being achieved for residents of Wokingham Borough. And this will enable our council-owned housing company, Wokingham Housing Limited, to turn this money into affordable housing for our children and the residents of the borough. We continue to develop our housing policy in the borough, and we will bring forward in the next quarter our young people persons strategy, which will mean in less than 9 months we have achieved a total review of our housing strategy for old, young and people, as well as an overall review for the residents in the borough. Thank you, Deputy Chairman.
Councillor Powell, do you have a second for this?
I do.
Councillor Holden, would you like to speak now? Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I'm very happy to accept that amendment if it makes you happy, even though I haven't actually seen any evidence of investigating what you can do. To provide some harmony, and because I think we actually fundamentally agree, I'm happy to accept that amendment. That's not my summing up speech.
Councillor Gill.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about some of the problems in the private rented sector and some ideas the council could look at. First, from the point of view of landlords, they don't always get their rent. Some tenants damage the property, others cause problems with antisocial behaviour, or in cases in the past, even with things like using the property as a cannabis farm or a brothel. Those cases are luckily rare. Is there something the council can do to help people prepare for taking on a tenancy? For example, educating young people in managing their finances, or providing proper support for vulnerable people so they can sustain their private sector tenancies. We have tenancy sustainment officers for council tenants now. Why not look at going wider? From the point of view of tenants, apart from simply finding somewhere you can afford, there can be issues with poorly maintained properties, not getting deposits back, or being evicted if you complain or the landlord wants the property back. There is a huge problem with short-term tenancies, which mean that you may have to move every few months, which can be really disruptive when you have school-aged children. Something as simple as a checklist for new tenants to run through with their landlords would help. So would landlord or letting agent certification. One group that have particular problems are single people under 35. It's not so bad if they're working, but if they're on a low wage or unemployed, they will rely on some element of housing benefit. And their entitlement is limited to a room in a shared house. Crisis, the charity that is specifically focused on accommodation for homeless single people, has produced a whole load of fact sheets and guidance and suggestions for what councils can do to help. One idea is to run a tenant matching service to help them find the right accommodation. I think that's a really good idea that this council could look at. Crisis also provides information and support for councils who want to set up some form of private renting access scheme for people at risk of homelessness. The starter guide and background information are free. The council should at least look at this when drawing up its housing strategy. There are lots of ideas that would not be hugely expensive and could make a great deal of difference. I hope everyone will support the motion and that this council will proactively look at what it can do to help our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, do you want to respond? Or?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I mean, the whole point is that the cost of renting in the private sector is very high. And we all know why it's very high, because we don't have enough houses. So the key is to generate more houses, and that is something that we are doing. Many of the things that you have raised latterly are things that are national, not local. We can do little about them locally, but there are many national policies. You're also aware, I'm sure, that the government is looking at the whole question of tenancy. In fact, they have a proposal out for consultation right now, which proposes a much longer tenancy, and which is good, because I think it is ridiculous that we expect anybody to take us on a short-term tenancy of 6 months to do any planning as to it. It's absolutely vital that we get that on a much longer term. So we have government support here, so that's going on well. But we are generating a lot of affordable housing, as you know, and John has already mentioned the fact that we have committed sums, and we're using those sums already we've created some mobile homes in Winnish, for instance, which is low-cost housing, and we are using it on other sites, such as the Phoenix Avenue, is being, again, it's committed sums that are helping to pay that. So I don't think we have anything to be ashamed of, but we are facing a national problem. And the national problem is that prices are just too high. Now, there is some hope. My personal view is that they will drop. Last month, in fact, the Halifax index showed a reduction. Just a sort of very small reduction, and I'm sure that will continue.
as houses come on stream, and particularly when the rates for the bank go up towards the end of the year, I think we will see a lessening of demand. So I'm pleased you're going to accept the amendment approved. And the other thing that I will do is that I will undertake to bring to the Affordable Housing Implementation Group a paper that we can all discuss and talk a little bit more about what we can. Thank you.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to say a few words on this. I support the amended motion, as I'm not sure on the other side of the room. I'm one of the few members who live in private rented accommodation with my wife, and we're currently saving to buy our own home. So I support this amended motion. Just to add though, further to what Philip has just said, our housing companies are committed to affordable housing. I look forward to them continuing to this great work, especially with the renamed Phoenix Avenue. Thank you very much.
Councillor Tom Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the amendment. We're all pretty much sailing in the same sort of direction here. But I would like us to remember that there's two sides to this. There are some very good landlords out there who are doing a lot of good work and who are helping people and accommodating people in need. And I would be very interested to know, as part of this review, how we would or could look at helping good landlords become even better landlords and serving our community. That's one point I'd like to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So Michael Firmington.
Yeah, thank you. I really wasn't going to speak, but I just tried to destroy this little bit of harmony, which was great to see, and I'm very pleased with it. But Councillor Bray referred to the bedroom tax. The bedroom tax is actually referring to the spare room subsidy. The removal of subsidy cannot be a tax. This was actually supported by the Liberal Democrat MPs in the coalition government in the Houses of Parliament. But however, the Deputy Prime Minister has performed a U-turn on this, but it was supported. So I would like that recorded. Thank you.
Let's see.
Councillor Chris Smith, please.
On the next election.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I view Wokingham very much a victim of its own success. I'm, like Guy Grandison, looking to buy a house, and a lot of my colleagues always say how they want to move and live in Wokingham. It's got excellent schools, it's got excellent services, and they view it as a great place to live. So it's more about how can we encourage more and more people to come and live in our borough, but how do we manage that? And I think the increased supply of housing is the best way to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I'll attempt to sum up without being too unharmonious, if that's a word. I absolutely agree that the long-term solution with this is to build more affordable houses. In fact, overall, the reason prices are so high is we're about 3 million houses short as a country, which is an awful lot to build, and the private housing sector cannot build that many by itself. It hasn't managed to build anything like the number in any 1 year since I think the war, just about. So we're not going to get there without a lot of effort. But in case, I don't want to make him fall off his chair with shock, but I do think that David Chopping is trying to do a good job with WHL building with more.
I think you're doomed.
That's it, you're gone now.
Yes, that's you finished, David. Your credibility has gone now. And I hope the Council has relayed what Philip said about the short-term tendencies to government in that consultation, because I think it's very important, and I welcome his idea that he'll bring something to the Affordable Housing Implementation Group. On the subject of the bedroom tax, although to some people it may appear that there was a U-turn about a week ago on the Liberal Democrat support for this, in fact it was decided at our federal conference last September that as a party we were not in support of the implementation of it as it currently stands. And the main reason for that is that under the current way it is implemented, not the principle, people have nowhere to go to downsize to. And it is not fair to penalise people who cannot move somewhere else. I think our actual federal policy motion was to only remove housing benefit from people in the way it's laid out in the bedroom tax if they had refused to move. And I think that is a much fairer offer, and that is where we differ, I think, with what the policy has been. But it's a party decision, and I was very proud to have spoken in that debate and made that point. So in this case, not just I agree with Nick, but the party agrees with me. So that's where we stand. Obviously, in a coalition government with a bigger party, the bedroom tax will stay as it is if that's what the Conservatives wish, but our offering in our manifesto will be something different. But I am very glad, on a more local principle, that we have got some cross-party support. I do think that genuinely councillors in this authority want to do their best for people on housing, and I look forward to making some progress on the housing strategy in line with what we've discussed tonight.
Councillor, thank you for the motion. Councillor Heiser, thank you for your contribution. Everybody else that's contributed. It now remains for me to ask for a vote on the amended motion, please. All those for? Anybody against? Carried. Well, that concludes the business for today. Thank you all very much indeed. And I wish you good night. Thank you.